What happens when a clumsy art graduate accidentally destroys a priceless sculpture right in front of the coldest, most powerful billionaire in the art world? A punishment she never expected, a secret he spent a lifetime hiding, and a connection that could cost them everything. Glamour, betrayal, forbidden love, and a past that refuses to stay buried. Subscribe now to our YouTube channel to uncover the twisted, passionate, and unpredictable story everyone will be talking about. You won't believe how it ends. The air inside the Coral Bay Grand Hall shimmered with opulence. Chandeliers cast golden light over gleaming marble floors, and the soft hum of strings from a live quartet mingled with the refined murmur of guests dressed in tuxedos and gowns. Art adorned every corner, vivid canvases, striking photographs, and centerpieces of sculpture, all displayed under crystal domes and soft spotlighting. Amelia Hayes, in a borrowed black dress a size too big, clutched her satin clutch like a lifeline as she trailed behind her best friend Harper. "Just smile and look like you belong," Harper whispered, already halfway into a conversation with a man holding a flute of champagne. Amelia, who had never attended an event fancier than a campus art showcase, nodded mutely. It was her first week as a college graduate, and this glittering Miami charity auction was light years from her quiet student life. She wandered cautiously, eyes wide at the six-figure price tags on art pieces she couldn't even imagine affording. Her gaze landed on a sculpture near the center of the room, an abstract swirl of bronze and glass, shaped like a suspended dancer mid-leap. It was mesmerizing. Drawn to it, she stepped closer, too close. Her heel caught on the edge of the rug. Time slowed. She flailed, tried to catch herself, and accidentally knocked her shoulder into the pedestal. The sculpture wobbled, tipped. "No, no, no." A gasp rippled through the room as the sculpture crashed to the floor with a sickening crack. Glass splintered like ice. Silence fell, immediate and absolute. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at the fragments like they might rearrange themselves if she blinked hard enough. A man stepped forward through the stunned crowd. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, midnight blue tie, dark eyes like glass obsidian fixed squarely on her. "Do you have any idea what you've just destroyed?" His voice was low, calm, but it cut sharper than any shout. "I didn't mean to," she stammered, her cheeks flushing scarlet. "It was an accident." "That," he said coolly, gesturing to the broken pieces at their feet, "was Elan Vital, a one-of-a-kind piece by Renard Lakier, recently valued at $400,000. Her mouth fell open. "You're joking." He arched one brow. "Does this seem like a joke to you?" She glanced around. Dozens of elite guests were staring, some in horror, some with thinly veiled amusement. Her knees felt weak. "I'll pay for it," she blurted. "You'll what?" "I'll somehow, eventually," she winced. Even saying it sounded ridiculous. She had exactly $87 in her bank account and a mountain of student debt. The man stared at her, as if calculating the weight of her presence in the room. "Name." "Amelia Hayes," she said, swallowing hard. He extended a hand, not in greeting but almost like an order. "Come with me, Miss Hayes." "Wait, where?" But he was already turning, walking away like he had every expectation she would follow. And for some inexplicable reason, she did. He led her through a set of polished mahogany doors into a smaller, private salon, quiet, luxurious, and somehow more intimidating than the grand ballroom itself. Amelia felt the tension in her spine tighten with each click of her heels on the marble floor. He didn't look back once, simply gestured for her to sit as he poured himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. She remained standing. "I didn't mean to break it," she said again, desperate to fill the silence. "I tripped and—" Marcus Thorne turned to face her, the glass in his hand catching the light. "I'm not interested in apologies, Miss Hayes." "Then what are you interested in?" she snapped, nerves fraying. "Public humiliation, Or do you plan to sue me into a cardboard box? For a moment he almost smiled, almost neither. She blinked. I don't want your money. I doubt you have any, he said bluntly, glancing at her shoes scuffed at the toe, clearly second-hand. And dragging you into court would be a waste of my time. Then why am I here? He stepped closer, and she instinctively took half a step back. You destroyed something irreplaceable, he said, but I believe in creative forms of restitution. Restitution, she repeated, wary. I have a vacancy, temporary. My assistant left last week and I haven't found a replacement worth hearing. He took a sip of his drink. You will work for me, 30 days. In exchange, I won't pursue legal action. Amelia stared at him, incredulous. You want me to be your assistant? That's your solution. You'll answer calls, manage appointments, handle logistics, attend a few events. Think of it as an immersive education, something your overpriced art degree couldn't teach you. Her jaw clenched. That's insane. Possibly, he admitted with a shrug, but it's the only offer you're going to get tonight that doesn't involve lawyers. She crossed her arms. You can't be serious. Completely, and I don't do second chances. He placed the glass down and met her eyes. So, what will it be, Miss Hayes? 30 days of inconvenient servitude or 30 years of debt? She exhaled slowly, biting the inside of her cheek. This was humiliating, ridiculous, a terrible idea, but it was also her only way out. Fine, she muttered. 30 days, that's it. He offered a single nod, satisfied. Good, you start tomorrow. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Oh, and Amelia. What now? She asked over her shoulder. Don't wear those shoes again. They're dreadful. She bit back a curse and left before she could say something truly regrettable. Amelia's first morning as Marcus Thorne's assistant began with a painfully early alarm, a blister on her heel, and a strong urge to fake her own death. The Thorne Art and Acquisition office occupied the entire top floor of a sleek downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Miami skyline, and everything was pristine, minimalist, quiet, expensive in a way that whispered rather than shouted. Amelia stepped out of the elevator clutching a notebook, wearing her most professional outfit, a wrinkled blouse and a blazer borrowed from Harper, and trying very hard not to look like a fraud. The receptionist, a terrifyingly polished woman named Simone, gave her a glance that could have frozen lava. You're late, Simone said. It's 8:57, Amelia replied, blinking. Mr. Thorne prefers arrivals at 8:45. Promptness is respect. Amelia offered a tight smile, duly noted. Her desk was a sleek slab of glass positioned inconveniently outside Marcus's office, where she could feel the weight of his presence even through a closed door. A digital schedule blinked on the monitor. Back-to-back meetings, video calls, art reviews, client dinners. Names she barely recognized. Galleries she couldn't pronounce. She took a deep breath. Okay, you can do this. By 10 a.m. she had already mispronounced the name of a Japanese ceramicist during a video call. Turns out Koji wasn't pronounced like cozy. Sent an internal memo meant for Marcus to the wrong Ms. Laurent. Unfortunately, the rival gallery owner, not the interior designer. And delivered his coffee with oat milk instead of almond. He didn't say a word about the coffee. He just sipped it once, set it down slowly, and pushed it to the farthest corner of his desk like it was radioactive. She wanted the earth to swallow her whole. At noon, she attempted to update his digital calendar and accidentally deleted an entire week's worth of appointments. I can fix it, she promised, fingers flying across the keyboard in a mild panic. Marcus leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. I've had interns at 16 who were more competent. Cool, thanks, she muttered under her breath. Really motivating. He ignored that. You'll accompany me to the Whitmore exhibit tonight. She looked up startled. Me. You're my assistant, he said, as if explaining gravity. Assist. But I've already ruined half your professional life today. He gave a slow, deliberate shrug. Then you can ruin the second half in public. She stared at him, incredulous. Was this some kind of twisted hazing ritual? Still, as he turned back into his office, she heard something suspiciously like amusement in his voice. And somehow, despite everything, a tiny part of her wanted to prove she wasn't as hopeless as she looked. The Whitmore exhibit was held in a private gallery tucked behind velvet ropes and glass facades, accessible only to a select list of patrons, critics, and collectors whose names carried weight like gold. Amelia walked in behind Marcus, heels too high, nerves too loud. The gallery was hushed and reverent, as if art itself demanded silence. She'd been to museums, sure, crowded, student-friendly, casual. But this was something else entirely. Every painting was guarded like a treasure. Sculptures gleamed under carefully angled lighting. Waiters floated through the room with trays of champagne, and conversations were quiet but charged, deals in disguise, gossip in silk wrapping. "You're fidgeting," Marcus said beside her, not bothering to look. "I feel like I'm breathing too loudly," she whispered. "You are." She scowled but said nothing. Her eyes darted around, trying to absorb the room. To her left, two women in sequined dresses were murmuring about a rare Degas sketch. To her right, a pair of men were shaking hands over a six-figure sculpture sale. "Why am I even here?" she muttered. "I'm not exactly gallery girl material." "You're here to observe," Marcus said simply, "and learn." Learn what? How to fake smile through people pretending they care about meaning while actually just chasing investments. That made him glance at her. "Very astute," he said. "Art at this level is rarely just about art, it's politics, power, legacy." She blinked. "Is that why you collect?" He didn't answer. They moved into the next room, where a provocative oil painting dominated the wall, abstract, angry, powerful. Amelia stepped closer, absorbing the tension in the strokes, the violence in the color. "What do you see?" Marcus asked quietly. She hesitated. "Rage, but not pure, it's performed rage. Beautifully constructed, almost too perfect to be honest." He looked at her, long and unreadable. "Most people say red and scary." "Well, I'm not most people." He gave a quiet sound, half amused, half something else. Later that night, as they sat in the backseat of a town car, Amelia stared out the window at the Miami lights, her mind still buzzing. "That woman in the green dress," she said suddenly. "She offered to host a private viewing for a museum director in Paris. That didn't sound very ethical." It was. And that old man, the one who bought the sculpture from the young artist, he laughed about flipping it in 6 months for double. "That's how it works." She turned to him. "Isn't that depressing?" He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "The art world isn't a church, Amelia. It's a marketplace dressed in poetry." She fell silent, trying to reconcile the beauty she loved with the machinery behind it. That night, lying in bed, she thought of brushstrokes and champagne, and the way Marcus had watched her more than he looked at the art. And for the first time, she wondered, not what she'd gotten herself into, but who exactly she'd agreed to work for. The next event was held at the Langham Gallery, an invitation-only evening exhibition known more for its guest list than its actual art. Amelia had started to grow more confident in these spaces, at least on the surface. She learned how to nod at the right people, hold a champagne flute without spilling, and speak just enough to sound mildly cultured without inviting deeper conversation. She wasn't prepared for her. Celeste Laurent entered the room like a storm in heels. Everything about her commanded attention: the flawless black satin gown, the updo that looked effortless but probably took hours, the glint of something sharp behind her smile. She was elegance weaponized. Amelia spotted her from across the room, because how could you not? Guests parted unconsciously as she moved, murmuring her name like an incantation. She was more than a collector. She was a legend. Celeste's gaze swept the gallery once, landed on Marcus and lingered. Then slowly her eyes moved to Amelia. A flicker of recognition, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, Celeste purred as she approached, placing a perfectly timed kiss on his cheek. It's been far too long. Celeste, Marcus said evenly, I thought you were still in Vienna. I was, but you know me, I go where the art calls. Her voice was low, confident, practiced. Amelia stood just behind Marcus, unsure whether to speak or vanish into the nearest potted plant. Celeste turned her gaze toward her like a beam of cold light. And who is this? Amelia Hayes, Marcus said, my assistant. Celeste's smile sharpened. Assistant, how quaint. Amelia extended a hand, keeping her chin up. Pleasure to meet you. Celeste took her hand delicately, then released it as if she might smudge something. The pleasure is mine. Marcus always did have a weakness for artistic types. Amelia couldn't tell if that was an insult, a compliment, or both. Probably both. Are you enjoying the exhibition? Celeste asked, her tone syrupy and insincere. It's beautiful, Amelia replied carefully, though I'm still learning to tell the difference between what's genuinely moving and what's just expensive. That earned a raised eyebrow from Celeste. How refreshingly blunt. Marcus, who had been watching the exchange with the mild disinterest of someone assessing two chess pieces, finally spoke. Celeste is curating a private show in Prague next month. She's been monopolizing several emerging artists lately. Celeste's eyes didn't leave Amelia's. One must know how to spot talent early, before it's corrupted by commercial taste. Or before someone else buys them first, Marcus said flatly. For the first time, Celeste's smile faltered, briefly. Then she tilted her head and her gaze slid back to Amelia with something almost playful. Good luck, Amelia, she said softly. This world eats its darlings. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind the scent of jasmine and just the faintest sense that something dangerous had been set in motion. Amelia let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Friend of yours? She asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. Not exactly. She called herself your former partner. She was. In business. A pause. In everything, he said quietly. The storm came in fast, unexpected, furious, and blinding. What was meant to be a brief visit to Marcus's beachfront estate after a late gallery meeting turned into an overnight detour when the causeway was shut down due to rising tides and violent winds. Amelia stood by the tall windows of the oceanfront living room, watching sheets of rain blur the horizon. The sea thrashed, angry and wild. Behind her, the room was all cold elegance, minimalist furniture, stark art, too much space and too little warmth. This place looks like a magazine spread, she murmured, arms folded as thunder growled in the distance. Beautiful, but no one actually lives here, do they? Marcus, seated in a charcoal-gray armchair with a glass of wine, didn't look up. I do, occasionally. That's not the same as living. He glanced at her then, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. You always speak like that. Like what? Like you're challenging people without realizing it. She blinked, caught off guard. I don't know, maybe it's not intentional. It's not unwelcome, he said quietly. Silence fell again, broken only by the patter of rain and the low hum of a jazz record playing somewhere in the background. The atmosphere had shifted, less tense, somehow, less performative. Amelia walked over to the fireplace, which had yet to be lit. She knelt down, flicked the ignition switch, and after a soft hiss, flames came to life. Golden warmth spilled into the room. That's better, she said, sitting cross-legged on the rug. Now it feels less like a sculpture gallery and more like a place someone might actually breathe in. Marcus watched her with mild curiosity, then stood and walked over, settling a few feet away on the edge of the sofa. For a moment, they just stared at the fire. "Were you close to your family?" she asked suddenly. He didn't answer right away. "No, not in any way that mattered." She nodded quietly. "Same." "Your parents?" he asked. "My dad left before I turned 5. Mom worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I spent most of my time drawing, or trying not to feel like I was too much or not enough. Sometimes both." There was no pity in his eyes, just a quiet, unexpected understanding. "I used to think art would save me," she added softly. "That if I just became good enough, the world would make sense. But the more I'm around all this—" She gestured vaguely at the storm outside and the expensive silence within. "The more I wonder if I've been naive." Marcus leaned back, wineglass resting loosely in his hand. "You're not naive, you're untainted, that's different." She looked at him then, not as the billionaire tycoon who intimidated her daily, but as someone unexpectedly alone. "What about you?" she asked. "What made you fall in love with art?" He didn't speak for a long time. "My mother," he said finally. "She was an artist, brilliant, complicated, fragile. She used to tell me the world was too loud, but painting helped her quiet it." "What happened to her?" His gaze darkened, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "She died, and no one cared why." Amelia didn't push. She just nodded, letting the silence be enough. The fire crackled between them, warm and alive. And in that quiet moment, storm raging outside, shadows dancing on the walls, they weren't employer and assistant. Just 2 people, shaped by loneliness, sitting in a house too large, too quiet, trying to remember what it meant to be seen. Neither of them said it aloud, but something between them shifted that night, quiet and unspoken, like the first brushstroke on a blank canvas. The morning after the storm, Amelia woke up in one of the guest bedrooms, larger than her entire apartment, with sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains and the soft sound of waves lapping outside. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came back: the storm, the fire, the quiet confessions. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, unsure if she was even allowed to touch anything in a house that looked like a design museum. But there was already the rich aroma of coffee brewing, and Marcus, still in a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled, stood at the stove, scrambling eggs like someone who didn't usually do it but could. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "I exist. Occasionally," he replied dryly, glancing over his shoulder. She laughed and he handed her a cup of coffee, almond milk, just how he liked it. She raised an eyebrow. "You remembered." He didn't respond, but she caught the flicker of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Something had changed since last night. The sharp edges between them had dulled, like 2 pieces of glass worn down by proximity. Marcus still moved with precision, still wore silence like armor, but Amelia could sense the fractures now, the fault lines beneath the surface. She noticed how his gaze lingered longer than it used to, how he paused before speaking to her, as if weighing not just the words, but how they might sound coming from him. And Marcus couldn't quite stop watching her. She was chaotic in the most unexpected ways. She mispronounced names in meetings but could analyze a sculpture like she had known the artist personally. She challenged his decisions, sometimes unwisely, but never without reason. She didn't try to impress, and perhaps that's why she did. In a world of people trained to flatter and manipulate, Amelia was startlingly real, unpolished, unfiltered, and unafraid to tell him he was being an ass, which she did more than once. That day, during a client lunch meeting, she accidentally knocked over a crystal water glass. It shattered on the marble floor mid-conversation. "I swear this place has a vendetta against stemware," she muttered under her breath as she crouched to clean it. The client laughed. Marcus didn't. Instead, he looked at her, kneeling, embarrassed but muttering jokes to herself anyway, and something tightened in his chest. He didn't understand it, not fully, but he felt it. Later, as they rode back in the car, he found himself watching her reflection in the window. Hair messy from the wind, lipstick faded, and yet she glowed in a way no polished socialite ever had. "I was a disaster again, was I?" she sighed. "No," he said quietly, "you were honest." She turned to look at him. "That's not usually a compliment coming from you." "It is now." She didn't say anything, but the way her smile faltered, softened, said everything. In the silence that followed, the distance between them felt less like a line and more like a bridge being built, plank by careful plank. Neither of them would admit it out loud, not yet, but something had begun. Not just attraction, not just curiosity, but something deeper. Something neither of them could quite name. The afternoon was unusually quiet at the estate. Marcus had left for a last-minute meeting, telling Amelia he'd only be gone a few hours and to try not to set anything on fire. She rolled her eyes, of course, but now, alone in the sprawling house, the silence stretched long and strange. She wandered aimlessly, barefoot, mug of tea in hand, the sea breeze slipping in through a cracked balcony door. She wasn't snooping, not really, just exploring. One hallway led to another and then to a set of heavy double doors she'd never noticed before. Polished wood. No label. A faint smear of dust on the handle as if it hadn't been touched in a while. She tried the knob. Locked. Of course it was. But just as she turned to leave, the door creaked, click, open half an inch. She blinked. Was it just stuck before? Curiosity overruled caution. She pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. The air shifted, cooler, heavier. It wasn't just a room. It was a gallery, a private one, smaller than the others she'd seen in the house, but more intimate and more unsettling. Paintings lined the walls, dozens of them. All originals, but none like the pieces Marcus had ever shown her before. These were darker. The colors were mudded, stormy, faces half-formed, bodies twisting in agony, emotions too raw to be decorative. Each canvas pulsed with something that made the skin on her arms prickle. She stepped closer to one, a painting of a woman in a red dress, her face melting into shadows. It was haunting, beautiful in a terrifying, honest way. Then her gaze landed on the easel in the center of the room. One painting, unfinished. A portrait of a woman. Young, gentle eyes, familiar features, but the brushstroke stopped at the edge of her smile, leaving her incomplete, as if frozen in the middle of becoming. Amelia stepped closer, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. That's when she heard it, the voice behind her, quiet, icy. "What are you doing in here?" She spun around. Marcus stood in the doorway, rain-damp hair swept back, jaw tight, eyes like storms. I didn't mean to. The door wasn't locked." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her gently but firmly by the arm, guiding her away from the painting. "I told you never to enter this room." "You didn't," she protested. "I didn't even know it was." His voice rose, sharper than she'd ever heard it. "This room is off limits. Do you understand?" She stared at him, shaken. "It's just art, Marcus. Why are you?" "It's not just anything," he snapped. The fury in his voice wasn't just anger. It was pain, grief with nowhere to go. Realizing that made her heart ache. "I'm sorry," she said softly, genuinely. "I didn't mean to invade anything. I just didn't expect it to feel so personal." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then quietly, too quietly, he said, "That's the point." And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the room full of ghosts. She stood there, staring at the unfinished portrait, wondering who the woman was, and what part of Marcus had been left behind on that canvas, unfinished, just like her. It arrived the next morning, tucked neatly between the pages of her planner. Amelia found it while flipping through her notes, sandwiched between reminders for Marcus's gallery tour and a list of names she could barely pronounce. At first, she thought it was a misplaced receipt or some cryptic memo Marcus had scribbled in his infuriatingly elegant handwriting. But the paper was thick, cream-colored, no letterhead, and the message was typed, not handwritten, just one line in all uppercase letters. If you stay with Marcus, you will die with the Thornesecrets. No signature, no return address. Her blood ran cold. She looked around the office instinctively, but no one was near. Marcus's door was closed. Simone was at her desk, typing briskly. The usual hush of professionalism filled the space, but now it felt wrong. Off. She read the note again, then again. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she folded the letter and slipped it into her coat pocket. She told herself it was a prank, some bitter ex-client, or worse, Celeste trying to psych her out. It had to be. But even as she reasoned with herself, her chest tightened. Was it about the painting? The room? The woman in the portrait? Her phone buzzed, Marcus texting. Ready in 5, black tie, don't wear those silver shoes. She almost laughed, almost, but the weight of the note pressed against her like a stone. For the rest of the day, she couldn't shake it. Every phone ring startled her. Every passing glance made her second guess. She felt exposed, like someone was watching her from just beyond her peripheral vision. She considered telling Marcus several times, but the image of his face when he caught her in the forbidden gallery flashed through her mind. That raw, wounded anger. No, not yet. She tucked the note deeper into her pocket and said nothing. But she couldn't help the way her eyes kept scanning the room. And for the first time since stepping into Marcus Thorne's orbit, Amelia didn't feel like she was part of an accidental love story. She felt like she'd stepped into a mystery, one with sharp teeth and secrets wrapped in silk. The gallery was already crowded when Amelia arrived, dressed in a sleek black dress that Harper had insisted she borrow. The event was for the unveiling of a contemporary collection, new artists, bold pieces, and even bolder prices. She had spent the entire ride rehearsing how to pronounce the name of the headlining sculptor, Miloš Dražin, emphasis on the M-E-E, determined not to trip over her tongue again. Marcus was already there, standing near a striking steel and glass installation, speaking with several collectors. He looked polished, unreadable as always. Amelia hovered nearby, quietly checking her tablet and avoiding eye contact with a tray of precariously tall champagne flutes. Then Celeste arrived. She glided through the crowd like a panther in emerald silk, smiling just enough, touching arms and shaking hands with practiced grace. And when she spotted Marcus, her smile sharpened. "Darling," she said smoothly, placing her hand lightly on his chest as she leaned in for a kiss that lingered too long. Amelia stiffened, just a few feet away. Marcus didn't return the touch, but he also didn't push her away. Celeste turned, her eyes falling on Amelia like a hawk spotting something small and out of place. "Oh," she said, voice honey-sweet, "you're here, how charming." "I work here," Amelia replied flatly. "So I've heard," Celeste said, tilting her head. "Come, you must try the red, imported from Tuscany, almost worth a minor scandal." Amelia hesitated. "I'm technically working." Celeste chuckled. "Oh, darling, so am I." She handed Amelia a glass before she could protest and clinked hers against it with just a little too much force. "To shared interest," Celeste said, eyes flicking toward Marcus. Amelia took a cautious sip. The wine was rich, warm, and stronger than she expected. Before she could set it down, Celeste gently nudged her by the elbow, guiding her toward one of the featured pieces, a delicately balanced mobile sculpture of blown glass orbs suspended in midair, shimmering under the lights. "So fragile," Celeste said thoughtfully, "one wrong move." And then it happened. A stumble, a slip. Amelia didn't even know if it was her or Celeste or a combination of both, but her elbow caught the side of the display, and one of the glass orbs wobbled, then fell. The crash was loud, piercing. The entire room turned. Shards scattered across the polished floor. Amelia froze, wine still in hand, horror blooming across her face. "I didn't mean to," she stammered. Before she could gather herself, Marcus was at her side. "What the hell happened?" His voice was low, sharp, but laced with restraint, his public voice. "It was an accident," she said quickly. "I was Celeste." But Celeste had already stepped back, concern perfectly painted on her face. "She must have tripped," she said, placing a hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Poor thing. These events can be so overwhelming." Amelia's mouth opened in protest, but Marcus cut her off. "We'll pay for the damage," he told the gallery owner coolly. Then to Amelia, his voice dropped, colder now. "We'll talk about this later." She stood there, stunned, as he turned away. The weight of every stare in the room pressed against her like stone. Her hands trembled around the empty wine glass. Celeste offered a gentle pat on the back, lips curved in mock sympathy. "Don't worry, Amelia, we all have our moments." And just like that, she melted back into the crowd, leaving Amelia alone amid the broken glass and a fresh crack forming, this one between her and Marcus. The car ride back from the gallery was silent. Marcus sat on one side of the backseat, eyes fixed on the window, jaw tight. Amelia sat stiffly beside him, hands clenched in her lap. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was loud, accusing. She wanted to say something, explain, defend herself, scream, but she didn't. He hadn't asked for an explanation. And somehow, that hurt more than the actual accusation. When they arrived at the estate, Marcus stepped out without a word, heading straight inside. Amelia followed slowly, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. In the hallway, she finally spoke. "I didn't break that sculpture on purpose." Marcus turned, his expression unreadable in the low light. "I never said you did." "But you acted like it," she said, her voice tightening. "You didn't even ask me what happened, you just assumed." His eyes met hers, cold and precise. "You've been careless before. This time it cost $100,000. What was I supposed to do? Applaud?" "You were supposed to trust me," she snapped, voice cracking. "But maybe that's too much to ask from a man who trusts no one." Silence again, a beat, too. Then Marcus said, too quietly, "That room, you had no business in it either, and yet you went." "This isn't about that room," she hissed. "This is about you seeing me as nothing more than another liability." His lips parted like he might argue, but he didn't. He just looked at her, not cold, not angry, just distant, closed. And that was the final blow. "I'm done," she said, voice trembling. "I won't be a problem you need to manage, Marcus, or a mess you regret hearing." He said nothing. "Say something," she whispered. Still nothing. Amelia's eyes stung, but she turned on her heel, walking to the guest room where her things were packed loosely into an overnight bag. She'd never really unpacked. Maybe deep down she knew this place, this world, wasn't hers to keep. She didn't look back when she walked out the front door, the wind colder than it had any right to be in Miami. And Marcus, he stood at the window long after the headlights disappeared. His fists clenched, his jaw set. And still he didn't move, didn't chase. Because if he let himself open that door, he wasn't sure he'd be able to close it again. It had been 4 days since Amelia left the Thorne estate. She hadn't heard from Marcus, not a message, not a call, not even a vague, passive-aggressive calendar update from Simone. She told herself she was fine, that leaving had been the right thing, that she didn't care. She was a liar. To distract herself, she agreed to meet up with an old friend from college, Theo, a freelance curator who was always more connected to the undercurrent of the art world than anyone she knew. They met at a low-key cafe in the design district, far from champagne galas and cutthroat collectors. Theo was halfway through his espresso when he finally asked, "So, how's working for Marcus Thorne?" Amelia stirred her tea, eyes on the swirling surface. "Over." His brows lifted. "That didn't take long. Let's just say I'm not exactly cut out for the luxury assistant life," she muttered. Then, curiosity breaking through the bitterness, she added, "You've heard of him." "Everyone has," Theo said. "He's a walking paradox. Cold, obsessive, brilliant. Some people say he's cursed." Amelia gave him a skeptical look. "That's dramatic, even for you." "No, really," Theo said, leaning in. "You never heard the story about his mother." She froze. "His mother?" Theo sipped, then nodded. "Vivienne Thorne, she was a painter, like a real one, emotionally raw, honest, the kind of art that guts you. She almost broke out into the mainstream, too. But then," he paused, voice lowering, "there was a scandal, huge. Turned out someone had forged her signature on a series of pieces. High-profile buyers, big money involved. And guess who orchestrated it?" Amelia shook her head, the pit in her stomach tightening. "Her brother-in-law," Theo said. "Marcus's uncle. He used her name, sold the fakes, pocketed the profits. When the truth came out, Vivienne was discredited overnight. People thought she'd been in on it." Amelia swallowed hard. "Was she?" "No, she was devastated, humiliated, retreated completely. Some say she burned every canvas she ever painted." He leaned back. "She took her life not long after that. Marcus was 17. The words hit her like cold water. That locked gallery, the unfinished portrait, the way Marcus avoided any mention of his past, the fury in his eyes when she asked too many questions. "God," she whispered. "That's why he became who he is," Theo continued. "He doesn't trust the art world, especially the people in it, and especially women who remind him of her." Amelia blinked. "Remind him?" Theo raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Ames, you're stubborn, you challenge him, you feel things loudly. You think he doesn't see that?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Her heart was already unraveling the truth. Marcus didn't just keep people out because he was cruel. He did it because once, someone he loved was destroyed by trust, and he hadn't let anyone close enough to hurt him since. Until now. Until her. The bus ride back to Amelia's hometown was long, quiet, and strangely comforting. She hadn't been there in years, not really. Only for rushed holidays or funerals when the past knocked too hard to ignore. But now it welcomed her with its familiar imperfections: cracked sidewalks, overgrown fences, the smell of sun-warmed concrete and fresh bread from the corner bakery. No marble floors, no million-dollar sculptures, no Marcus Thorne. Just home. Within a week, Amelia had rented a modest space inside the old community center, a building that smelled faintly of paint thinner and chalk dust. She cleaned it herself, bought used easels off Craigslist, and used what little savings she had left to stock up on brushes, sketchpads, and dollar store acrylics. Her first class had 4 kids. By the end of the second week, there were 12. They came with wide eyes and small hands, some quiet, some loud, all carrying the same hunger for expression she once had. She taught them the basics: how to blend, how to shade, how to let go of the need for perfection. Mostly, she taught them to see. One afternoon, a little girl named Marisol held up a messy, bright orange dragon and asked shyly, "Is this good?" Amelia knelt beside her and smiled. "If it makes your heart beat faster, then it's better than good." The days passed gently, without pressure or expectation. Amelia wore paint-stained jeans and drank cheap coffee from paper cups. She walked home every evening with color on her hands and quiet in her heart. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't groundbreaking, but it was real. Still, some nights, when the kids had gone home and the sun dipped low, she'd catch herself staring at the unfinished canvas tucked behind the supply shelf. The one she hadn't touched since leaving Miami. The one she'd started with Marcus in her mind. She didn't try to finish it. Not yet. She wasn't sure why, but something in her knew. The painting would only be complete when she wasn't carrying the weight of unsaid things. When she could paint not out of heartbreak or memory, but out of truth. And maybe someday peace. It started with a name, hidden in the metadata of an anonymous email. Marcus had been reviewing archived correspondence from the gallery security system, prompted by a gut feeling he couldn't shake. Amelia's departure had left a silence in his life louder than her presence ever was, and that silence pressed him to look where he hadn't before. The anonymous threat she never told him about. He found it buried in the server logs after requesting a full audit. The signature was masked, but the IP address traced back to a familiar source, a private studio loft in downtown Miami. Registered to Celeste Laurent. He stared at the screen for a long time, jaw tight, pulse rising. She had set Amelia up, not once but several times. The email, the wine, the positioning at the gallery that led to the sculpture's fall, even the PR leak about Amelia climbing the ladder through flirtation. It wasn't an accident, it was strategy. Elegant, precise, vicious. The realization burned. He didn't wait. The opportunity came faster than expected. A high-profile art gala hosted by the Armitage Foundation, one of the most prestigious events of the season. The elite of the art world would be there, cameras flashing, sponsors watching. Celeste, of course, would be at the center of it all. Marcus arrived late, on purpose. The moment he walked into the hall, sleek in a midnight blue tuxedo, expression like frost, eyes turned. Conversation stilled. Celeste, standing near a Lucian Greco oil painting, caught sight of him and smiled with practiced ease. "Marcus," she purred, "you've been scarce." "Busy uncovering sabotage," he replied coolly. Her smile faltered just slightly. He didn't waste time. "Would you like to explain how a digital trail from your loft led to a threatening email sent to my assistant?" The silence spread like ink through the crowd. Celeste's mask held for a second longer. Then, "Darling, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Then perhaps the investigative committee I've already contacted can clarify it for you," he said evenly. "I've turned over every log, every message, including the ones you sent under a pseudonym targeting Amelia Hayes." Murmurs rippled. Phones were discreetly raised. Gallery owners shifted, already distancing themselves from the scandal. "You're making a mistake," Celeste hissed under her breath. "No," Marcus said, his voice colder than winter. "The mistake was thinking I wouldn't find out." Security didn't remove her, not yet, but the whisper of investigation was enough. In this world, reputation was currency, and hers had just caught fire. As she stepped back, her poise cracking for the first time, Marcus turned and walked away, the crowd parting before him like water. He didn't feel triumph, he didn't want revenge. He wanted her to know that she hadn't just underestimated Amelia. She'd underestimated him, and what he was willing to do to protect the one person who had ever seen him without the walls. And now it was time to find her again, not to fix his reputation, but to ask for forgiveness, the kind that couldn't be demanded, only earned. It took Marcus 3 tries to find the community center. The place was humble, faded bricks, chipped signage, and a mural of sunflowers on the side that was more hopeful than professional. He stood outside for a moment, unsure if he belonged. His tailored coat and leather shoes looked wildly out of place here, among bicycles chained to fences and the scent of grilled corn drifting from a nearby street vendor. But he walked in anyway. Inside, children's laughter echoed off the walls. The classroom was bright, chaotic, and filled with the smell of glue sticks, acrylic paint, and something warm and human. Small hands clutched brushes. Paper scraps littered the tables. Someone had drawn a mustache on the Quiet Time poster with a blue marker. Amelia was crouched beside a little boy, helping him blend 2 shades of green. She hadn't seen him yet. Marcus watched her, no entourage, no heels, no pretense. Just her in a paint-splattered t-shirt, ponytail messy, eyes soft. And for the first time in a long time he felt quiet inside. When she finally looked up, her smile faltered. Their eyes locked. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then one of the kids tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Amelia, he's just standing there. Is he a new teacher or something?" She rose slowly. "He's not really a teacher." Marcus cleared his throat. "I could be, temporarily." The kid squinted up at him. "You look like a lawyer." Another piped up. "Can he paint dinosaurs?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I can try." Amelia's lips twitched. "Brave." She didn't ask why he was there. She didn't need to. He walked over, rolled up the sleeves of his coat, and picked up a brush from the nearest table. The children welcomed him with the ease only kids possess, unconcerned with status or past mistakes. Soon, Marcus was sitting cross-legged beside a pair of twins debating whether the sky should be purple or gold. He painted quietly, with concentration, and without judgment. And Amelia watched, stunned at how gently he listened, how carefully he moved, not like a man performing a gesture, but like someone learning how to feel something again. After the class ended, and the last of the kids had run outside with sticky fingers and glitter on their faces, Amelia found him in the back corner of the room, rinsing out brushes with surprising care. "I didn't expect to see you," she said softly. "I didn't expect to be here," he replied just as soft, "but I needed to be." He turned to her, and for the first time he didn't look guarded. He looked present. "I was wrong," he said, "about everything." She didn't speak, just let the words settle like dust in the warm air. Then he pulled something from a thin case he'd been carrying, a folded canvas, carefully preserved. He unrolled it and laid it flat on the nearest table. The unfinished portrait. The one from the locked room. Amelia froze. "I never finished it," Marcus said. "I never could, until I saw you teaching them, until I remembered what art looked like when it wasn't about money or legacy or survival." He handed her a brush. "Help me." She took it without a word. And together, side by side, paint on their fingers, silence between them soft instead of sharp, they began to bring her back to life. Not just the woman in the portrait, but themselves too. The studio was quiet now. The kids had gone home. The paint jars were capped, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, and the unfinished portrait sat between them, no longer haunting but waiting. Only the sound of brushes gently tapping the edges of glass jars remained. Marcus stood by the window, staring out at the dusky horizon, hands tucked into his coat pockets. Amelia didn't say anything. She sensed it, not distance but weight, a heaviness in the air, as if something long buried was rising to the surface. After a moment he spoke. "My mother used to paint late at night," he said. "When the house was asleep, when the noise in her head quieted, I'd wake up and find her sitting on the floor in a nightgown, barefoot, smudges of charcoal on her arms. She said she dreamed in colors." Amelia listened, still and open. "The night before she died, she left her studio door open," Marcus continued, voice low. "That never happened. She was meticulous, paranoid. But that night, it was like she wanted someone to walk in." He paused. "I did." His fingers tightened around the edge of the windowsill. "She asked me to look at her final painting, just one glance. It was unfinished like the one you found, but it was different, lighter, like she'd let go of something. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I think she was saying goodbye." Amelia swallowed, heart aching for the boy he had been. She made tea. We sat in silence. I thought things would be okay. Another pause. The next morning she was gone. He turned to her finally, eyes shadowed but clear. "Everyone blamed the scandal, the shame, but I think it was more than that. I think she felt like no one really saw her anymore, not the real her, Not the woman behind the art, just a product, a scandal, a name. Amelia stepped closer slowly. I've spent years building walls around that moment, Marcus said, pretending it didn't touch me, convincing myself that trusting people, especially artists, especially women like her, was a weakness. And then you walked into my world like a storm in sneakers. She almost laughed, almost. He took a breath. I didn't trust you, I hurt you, and I blamed you for a fear I never faced. Amelia met his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Then why are you here? Because you saw me, he said simply. Not the money, not the name, me. And I think that's what she wanted someone to do too. Silence stretched between them, but this time it felt sacred. Then he stepped forward. I'm sorry, Amelia, for not listening, for not protecting you, for not believing in you when it mattered most. She looked up at him, her throat tight. You really hurt me. I know. But you also showed me something real, she added. Something bigger than the games and the galleries and the masks. He waited. And then quietly, gently, she reached for his hand. I forgive you. And just like that, something fractured between them began to heal. Not all at once, but enough for them to finally start again. Not as broken pieces trying to fix each other, but as whole people learning how to build something true. They sat together on a bench outside the community center, the fading light of late afternoon casting long shadows over the sidewalk. A few kids lingered nearby, chasing each other with chalk-covered hands, laughter echoing like music. Marcus leaned back, suit jacket slung casually over one shoulder for once, not bothering with his usual polished posture. He looked at Amelia, who was sketching something in the corner of her notebook, a swirling figure, half real, half dream. You know, he said, watching the pencil move, I've spent years throwing money at foundations with names I barely remember, and not once did it ever mean anything. Amelia glanced up at him. You're saying you want to do something that means something. I'm saying I want to build something with you, he replied. Something that gives people what my mother never had, support, recognition, a space to create without fear of being erased. She stopped sketching. The sincerity in his voice wasn't grand, it was quiet, steady, real. He continued, I want to start a foundation. In her name. The Vivienne Thorne Initiative will fund young artists, create scholarships, open free access workshops for kids. Art should be for everyone, not just the elite. Amelia blinked. You really mean that? I do. And you want me to be involved? I want you to run it, he said without hesitation. Creative direction, curriculum, exhibitions, everything, no limits, no filters. She stared at him, stunned. You're putting your mother's legacy in my hands. I'm putting it where it belongs. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then, with a soft smile, okay, but only if I get to name the first studio after Marisol. She painted a purple dinosaur last week that made 3 kids cry and 1 teacher question their life choices. Marcus laughed, really laughed, and the sound was so unfamiliar coming from him that even the kids nearby turned to look. And in that moment, something solidified between them. Not just love, not just partnership. Purpose. Over the next few weeks, plans took shape. Papers were signed. Lawyers looped in. Architects consulted. But in the heart of it all, it was just Marcus and Amelia, sitting on floors covered in paint swatches, arguing over wall textures and scribbling ideas on napkins. The Vivienne Thorne Initiative was born not out of tragedy, but transformation. And at the very center of it stood a woman who once tripped over a sculpture, and a man who once locked himself away from everything that could feel. Now together, they were unlocking something new. A beginning. The invitation arrived in a matte black envelope, sealed with deep crimson wax. No logo, no grand flourish, just one word embossed in gold lettering. Amelia. She nearly dropped it when she read her name. At first she thought it was a mistake, an event for the foundation maybe, but when she arrived at the gallery something felt different. The lighting was softer, the crowd quieter, no press frenzy, no sponsors' logos plastered on walls, just anticipation hanging thick in the air. Simone greeted her at the door, for once with a smile that wasn't sharp. "He's been working on this for months," she said simply, then stepped aside. Amelia walked in and froze. The space had been transformed. Gone were the cold, minimalist installations Marcus was known for. In their place, color, vivid, wild, and alive. Paintings stretched across entire walls, portraits of movement, intimacy, chaos, laughter. Each piece pulsed with energy, raw and unfiltered. But somehow they all carried her. Not her face, not exactly, but her presence. Her soul. One canvas was all golden light and shadows, like the firelight that had flickered between them the night of the storm. Another showed a girl with wind-blown hair reaching toward something just out of frame, hope maybe, or freedom. And then at the very center of the gallery, beneath a spotlight that bathed it in quiet reverence, stood a single, empty frame. White canvas, untouched. Below it in small, handwritten script, "The final painting, yours to finish." Amelia didn't realize she was crying until a single tear landed on the invitation still clutched in her hand. She took a step closer, the world blurring around her, and saw something else. A small, framed note tucked beside the plaque. "I tried to paint you, but you kept moving, laughing, living. So I gave up and made space instead for the rest of the story. For you, for us. MT." A voice spoke softly behind her. "You once said art was meant to make your heart beat faster." She turned. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, nerves showing for the first time in a long time. "Did I get it right?" he asked. Amelia didn't answer. She just stepped into his arms and held on like the answer had always been there. The gallery watched in silence as the girl who once shattered a sculpture found herself framed in something infinitely more precious. Love, and the space to finish the painting herself. The crowd had thinned. The champagne flutes sat half full on nearby tables. The buzz of conversation faded into soft music and reverent murmurs as guests lingered, reluctant to leave the kind of evening that felt like it might never be replicated. But Amelia didn't notice any of that. She was still standing in front of the empty canvas, her canvas, when Marcus gently took her hand and led her to the center of the gallery, right beneath a skylight that revealed the first stars of the evening. Someone dimmed the lights. A hush settled over the room. Marcus didn't clear his throat or tap a glass. He didn't ask for silence. He simply turned to face her, eyes holding the weight of something long buried and now rising, fragile and true. "I've spent most of my life trying to restore what was broken," he began, his voice steady, low, meant for her and only her. "Paintings, names, reputations, things I could control, things I could fix." He took a breath, as if choosing each word with care. "But then you walked into my life, messy, honest, infuriatingly sincere. And for the first time, I stopped trying to restore what was lost and started believing in what could be new." Amelia's eyes filled again, her fingers trembling in his. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, the room seemed to exhale. Inside lay a delicate vintage ring, platinum band, a single round-cut diamond framed by two tiny sapphires. It was timeless, unshowy, beautiful. "It belonged to my mother," Marcus said softly. "It was the only thing she ever asked me to keep. I never understood why, not until now." He dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled softly around the gallery. Simone teared up in the corner. Even one of the security guards whispered, "Holy hell." Amelia covered her mouth, eyes wide. "I don't want to fix the past anymore," Marcus said. "I want to build the future with you, with your laughter, with your chaos, with your color." He looked up, eyes glassy but unwavering. "Amelia Hayes, will you marry me?" She didn't speak. She couldn't. Instead, she nodded, wildly, breathlessly, then dropped to her knees with him and kissed him hard, laughter breaking between them like sunlight after rain. The room erupted in applause, but they barely heard it. Because in that moment the ghosts were gone, the wounds were no longer open, and what lay ahead wasn't a restoration. It was a creation. Together, the wedding was nothing like the society pages had predicted. There were no crystal chandeliers or six-tiered cakes, no paparazzi, no ivory tower guest lists, just a quiet garden behind the community center, fairy lights strung between trees, and music played on an old record player Amelia had rescued from a thrift shop. The aisle was lined with wildflowers, painted by the children from her class, each petal a burst of color more honest than any florist could have arranged. Marcus wore a simple suit. Amelia wore a dress she'd helped design herself, stitched with delicate brushstroke patterns along the hem. When they said their vows, it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was everything. In the months that followed, the Vivienne Thorne Initiative bloomed. New art centers opened across the state, some in cities, others in quiet towns where no gallery had ever thought to go. Children painted their dreams on walls that once knew only silence. Teens found refuge in charcoal sketches instead of noise. Struggling artists were given grants, support, and most importantly, belief. Amelia curated programs, organized exhibitions, and traveled with Marcus to meet young creatives who had never before been told, "You matter. Your voice matters." And Marcus, he changed in small, beautiful ways. He laughed more, listened better, wore paint-smeared shirts on weekends, and every now and then, when no one was looking, he sat in a classroom and quietly painted with the youngest kids, never signing his name, just being. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low over their newest center in Santa Fe, Marcus and Amelia sat on a wooden bench, hands intertwined, watching two siblings cover an entire wall with a mural of galaxies and dragons. The air was warm, quiet, alive. Marcus turned to her, his voice just above a whisper. "This time," he said, brushing his thumb over the back of her hand, "the past isn't a chain, it's a canvas." She looked at him, her smile soft, eyes shining. "A canvas for what?" "For art," he said, resting his forehead against hers. "And for love." The past had shaped them. But the future, they would paint it together.